and get started. It's 9:08. We are on Thursday, so it's our Thursday form series. I've been going through, in case you didn't catch on to it, I've been covering the forms from the residential purchase agreement. So usually I open this with letting you know kind of where to find the forms, where they're referenced in the purchase agreement. And that's because when I set up this form series, I actually went through the purchase agreement and pulled the forms right out of that purchase agreement as they're listed, which has been really good because it brought to our attention forms like the solar form that I've never seen anybody ever use in a transaction ever in my life as a real estate agent. And it's one of those that should be included if the listing has solar. Like there's little things like that that are in here. I don't even remember. Oh, we covered the, I was trying to think what we covered last week. Look at the calendar. This is why it's a good thing it's on my calendar. Last week we covered the tenant forms, right? The TOPA, because it talks about that under possession, that those forms should be included. So we talked about that. So that's really what we're doing. When I go to put together the next schedule, when we release the new schedule for January, we're probably going to continue with the forms, forms series. Thank you. But I'm probably going to move it to Tuesday only because Tuesday is kind of an off day anyways, because our Tuesday trainings at 10:30, Wednesday, Thursday are at 9. So it makes more sense to have the forms on Tuesday at 10:30 and then everything else at 9 o'clock. So, so we'll probably be shifting that to come the new schedule that will come out in January. Ed's going to be running trainings for the next couple of weeks. I was hoping to have a calendar from him soon. I don't think I've seen that come through so that you guys know what to expect over the next couple of weeks as I move through the medical stuff with my family. And then I'll close out November and into December. I think we're talking about listings during that time period. And then we're going to roll out the new calendar. Oh, at the end of the year, stay tuned because I have a new book that I've now brought upstairs. I got the Millionaire Real Estate Agent Playbook. So handy. So, right. So you've got the Millionaire Real Estate Agent book, which I talk about all the time. We talk about it. Sorry, it's blurred because my background's blurred, but like it's got the organization model and the economic model. It shows you how to go from like being a brand new agent, the steps you should do, how you should work your database, how to set up your goals. It takes you through the fundamentals into being and how to set up your team, then how to grow and expand as a team into a millionaire real estate agent. So it tells you how to set up your business successfully to be able to run it as ultimately to net $1 million is the goal there. That being said, it's kind of like cumbersome and hard to understand. And there's a lot of information in here. So now they've taken it and put it into a playbook, which I'm super excited about because it's over 100 systems to move you from ideas and to action, right? So we have all these ideas and how do we put them into action? Or, hey, I want to do like a open house. Like, what does it look like to do a stellar open house? It's in here. So we'll be going through, this is going to be our special. Last week I did 12 days of lead gen. This year, I'm going to take you through the Millionaire Real Estate Agent Playbook and talk about. It'll probably be, there's 100 systems in there, so I'll probably limit it down to like 12 systems to move you from ideas to actions. I'll probably pick out my top 12 systems from there, and then we'll do that around Christmas time, end of the year, beginning of the new year, just to help you guys push your businesses forward while you're enjoying some holiday food and cookies. So there you go. Charles, did you have a question?
No, no.
Okay, totally fine. You were just unmuted, so I just wanted to make sure that I didn't.
I'm sorry, I took myself off mute.
You can leave yourself unmuted. I don't mind.
I do need to turn in this cancellation form. Are you going to be going over any type of cancellation forms, or is it self-explanatory?
It's pretty self-explanatory. There is a video on the YouTube channel under the form series that we have gone over the cancellation, but I can also go over it with you after this when we sit down.
Oh, thank you.
All right. So today we're covering the HOA forms. So I've got the residential purchase agreement pulled up currently. You should be able to see that on your screen. Here in section L, there's actually two sections where it talks about the HOA. One is the distribution of fees further up here. I saw it somewhere, or maybe, no, it was the ordering of the HOA documents was up further because that was the distribution of fees. Here in 3, time to pay for ordering fees for ordering HOA documents. Just so you know how this grid works, right? This is the reference, the dark bold letter on the side. So this is section 3 in 3. The second column is the paragraph that goes into further detail further down in the residential purchase agreement. So in section 11L2, you're going to find out more about that. So if you ever want to dig into where that comes from, that's your reference point. Okay, so in 3 references HOA, as well as down here under Q 12 through 14 is also HOA. And notice here we've got 11L2 as well. So we're gonna scoot down. We've got the HOA fee for preparing disclosures. State of California says sellers required for providing the statutory disclosures. So it's already marked seller there. The HOA certification fee, that's a buyer responsibility because that's a lender requirement. Okay, so that's something that's required by the lender is the HOA cert. And usually the lender has a form they send to the HOA to fill out that accomplishes that. And it's really just making sure that, hey, like the HOA has some reserves and the HOA, like how many units are owner occupied, how many total units and how many are rental units type thing. And then you've got your HOA transfer fees on Q14. Unless otherwise agreed, seller shall pay for separate HOA move out fee and buyer shall pay for separate move in fee. Applies if separately billed or itemized with a cost and a transfer fee, right? So it says here, hey, unless otherwise agreed, this is going to be what it is. And then like so if it's itemized, not a problem. If it's not itemized, then who pays those? You probably should specify, or you may need to come back and renegotiate based on that once the HOA transfer fees are out. So we're going to scroll down to 11L2, which is where it talks about the forms that we're going to be covering today. So we just right here, see it's got the paragraph numbers on the side. So we're just scrolling down to paragraph 11. And then we're gonna, which is the statutory and other disclosures. And we're gonna scroll down to section L. Right here, condominium plan development disclosures. Sellers shall within the time specified in paragraph 3 in 1 disclose to buyer whether properties in a condominium are located in a planned development, other common interest development, or otherwise subject to covenants, conditions, and restrictions. Right, CAR form SPQ or ESD. That's your seller property questionnaire or your exempt seller disclosure. So that's we didn't actually cover that. Hold on, back up to the grid. We talked about when they should pay the fees, but right here, seller delivery of documents down here, it's going to, nope. Oh, here, common interest disclosures, right? Needs to be there. So that should all fall underneath that. It should disclose whether they're in an HOA or not. All right. Scrolling back down to 11L2. If the property is in a condominium, are located in a planned development, that would be a PUD, just so you know, or other common interest development with an HOA, seller shall within the time specified in paragraph 3 in 3 order from and pay any fee required as specified by law, California form HOARS. Okay, so that's one of the forms we're covering today. Disclose any pending or anticipated claim or litigation against the HOA and a statement containing the location and number of designated parking and storage spaces. Copies of the most recent 12-month HOA minutes are for regular and special meetings. The names and contact information of all HOAs governing the property, pet restrictions and smoking restrictions. Those are CI disclosures. Seller shall itemize and deliver to buyer all CI disclosures received from the HOA and any CI disclosures in the seller's possession. Seller shall, as directed by escrow holder, deposit funds into escrow or direct the HOA or management or direct to HOA or management company to pay for any of the above. Okay, so we've got the HOA, the following items. Sorry, we skipped a section up here. No, we didn't. I referenced that, the HOA IR, and then we have the HOA RS, and there's one more HOA form that we'll be covering. But so there is where it talks about those forms. If you're like, Amy, what does that all mean? Seller's supposed to deliver to buyers specific documents. There's statutory disclosures. Those are going to be covered in the forms that we cover today. It'll list out what those statutory disclosures are. For some of those, The seller doesn't necessarily have to pay for them from the HOA. So if the seller or the listing agent or whoever already has those disclosures in their possession, like the rules and regulations and stuff, they don't have to order those directly from the HOA as long as they're providing you a true set of those disclosures. The things that come into play that they must order, even if they have, is like updated meeting minutes, if they don't have those, the updated financial statements from the HOA, and we'll go over all of that. So if it's already in somebody's possession, they can just, so if you've got like an agent that's farming that condo association, they might already have the documents, which is saving, it could save their sellers like hundreds of dollars. Those HOA docs can range from like 300 to like 1,200 bucks to get the complete package of HOA docs. And if you've already got them in your possession, you could be saving a seller money. So the first form is the HOA information request, the HOA-IR form. Okay, homeowner association information request. You're gonna put the property address here, the owner of the property, that's where the seller's names are gonna go, and the owner's mailing address, if known or different from the property address, right? We're gonna put all those things on this form. You're going to fill out the homeowners association name here on this line. And oftentimes, like it might be that they belong to the Lighthouse HOA, right? Like the community is called Lighthouse, but the HOA itself may be like the Glen Park HOA, right? So it may not match the community name because there may be, it may spill over and cover a couple different areas or whatnot, or just have a random different name. So don't ever assume that the HOA is the same as the community name. In fact, some places in Leisure Town actually are under 2 HOAs. So just so you know there as well. Right, HOAs must deliver the requested documents within 10 days of seller's request, Civil Code Section 4530A. So this is why it's so important up there on that residential purchase agreement that it specifies like seller to pay fee to HOA for doc prep within blank number of days. This is why it's so important to keep it like 1 to 3 days inside the opening of that contract, the acceptance of that contract, because this could take another 10 days. It could be like 13 days before you get copies of those HOA docs if the sellers don't pay for them and order them until day 3 of the contract, and then the HOA delays out 10 full days to get them those documents. We could be on day 13 before we actually receive those. Now, keep in mind that if our contingency for the review of any documents with regards to like HOAs is like a 10-day contingency and it takes us 13 days. Number one, we don't have to remove that contingency until we actually receive those documents. And the seller should be sending us an extension of time saying, hey, we don't have the documents yet. We're going to extend your time for review. But even if they don't, you don't have to remove that contingency until they've actually provided the documents for you to review. And if they provide those documents to you electronically or via mail, you have an additional 5 days to review those documents. So if our contingency is day 10, they provide them to you on day 13. We actually have until day 18 to remove that portion of the contingency because we have 5 days to review those documents once we receive them. If they hand deliver us the documents, if they show up at our office and say, hey, Charles, here's those HOA documents, then you've got 3 additional days, okay? The delivery is 3. And if they seller requests within 10 calendar days, and it's calendar days, not business days, from the receipt of this request, please provide to seller answers to the questions on section 2 and the items listed on the HOA-RS and the late HOA-RN on the address indicated above or to, and this is where you could be like, please email to, right? And oftentimes, just so you know, title and escrow is happy to order these HOA docs for you. If you are the listing agent and your property's in an HOA, you're listing, this is a good opportunity to open pre-escrow on the property and get these ordered before the property even hits the market. Okay, date here, seller and seller's agent or seller's agent is going to sign here. Okay, they're going to list the information here. Is the HOA self-managed or professionally managed? Right? It could be self-managed with the board of directors and they run their own, or they could have a management company managing it. They're going to fill out, there are blank units total, of those blank are owner occupied and blank are tenant occupied. Of the total units, does any owner own more than one unit? Yes or no? If yes, please describe. That actually killed a deal for me at one point. And it was a VA approved condo community. I had a VA buyer. Maybe he was going conventional at that point. I don't remember, but it was going to be owner occupied. And the HOA had one owner that owned like 3 or 4 units, which constituted like 20% of the condos in that community. And so the lender wouldn't actually loan on it because of the fact that if there's one owner that owns a certain percentage and they default, or those properties get foreclosed on, or something negative happens, that could tank the entire HOA community. So that became an issue. So if you ever wonder why do they ask that question, that's why. Does the HOA have any commercial units? Yes or no? If yes, please identify. Is the current regular assessment for this unit is blank dollars per month? If checked, it would be per quarter or per year, right? So if this was like Leisure Town and you were getting this filled out, they would mark it per year because they do their fees per year. The following regular assessment change to blank has been approved effective date. So if there's been a change to increase or decrease the HOA fee, that would be on line 4A. The current balance of the HOA operating account is blank as of blank date, right? There's filling this out. C is the HOA, if checked, maintains a separate reserve account with a balance, right? So we might have an operating account and a reserve account. Most HOAs have both. They're going to fill out that balance. They want to make sure they're ultimately the goal. This is what the HOA cert form often looks like for a lender, but we want to know this. And as a buyer's agent and for a buyer, you want to know this information, because if they have $20 in their operating account and they don't have a reserve account and something catastrophic happens to that HOA community, there's a lawsuit, there is some maintenance that needs done, the landscaper needs paid, like they don't have the funds to be able to do that. This HOA is not really that stable, right? So this constitutes and talks about how stable that HOA is. Okay, we don't want to buy a house where the HOA goes under or has to file bankruptcy. Especially on like a condo community where the HOA maintains the insurance and maintains the exterior of the building. Some HOAs aren't that important. Like we talk about, like an HOA where which we don't have very many of in like the Solano County area, but you see it more in the Bay Area where you've got full housing communities all fall into an HOA, or like up in the Tomas, that area of Sacramento, most of those communities are HOA and they have like community pools that those houses can use. But if that HOA goes under, oh, bummer, you can't use the pool or the clubhouse, but your house is still fine. You're still responsible for the insurance and stuff. So it's not as big a deal as like a condo community where they're supposed to be paying the insurance costs and the exterior maintenance. So little side note there. There are no delinquent assessments, penalties, attorney fees, or other charges due with respect to any unit except for, so here's where they would list out anybody who's delinquent in their assessments or any bills that are still outstanding. The following special assessment has been approved by the HOA. The description, amount payable by subject unit, due date, or payment schedule. So there's 2 lines right up here. We said, hey, the regular assessment is changing up here on 4B. Or 4A, sorry, 4A was, hey, it's scheduled to change. So sometimes HOAs vote in permanent changes where the rates go from, $300 to $330 per month, right? Or maybe it's going from $500 to $600 per year, right? So that would be, and that's forever, right? Until we vote another assessment. Sometimes there might be a special project that comes up, and maybe it's a special assessment because the roads need resurfaced. And this isn't something that we need to like bill forever, but maybe we determine that the cost of resurfacing the road is $20,000 and there's 100 units and we're going to divide that over the next 3 months or 4 months. So the assessment's going to go up. There's a special assessment. Those have to be voted on by the board of directors and by the people who are in the HOA, which is why it's important to attend HOA meetings if you live in one, because things like this get voted on. But here's where that would be filled out, like special assessment description, resurface road assessment. Amount payable by the subject unit would be, $100. per month for the next 3 months or until, January 2024, right? So they would fill that information out. The HOA anticipates the following special assessments that have not yet been approved for the maintenance, repairs, or to increase reserves. So if there's anything that is on the docket to be voted on, to be considered, that would go on line F. Any questions so far? All right. I'm trying to give you guys a lot of HOA information as we go through this form, because HOAs can be a little overwhelming if you've never done one before. 5 is there is or there is not pending or anticipated litigation or claims affecting the HOA. If so, attach the description. I know somebody asked me this the other day about is pending litigation, like what's so important about that and why does that have to be disclosed? Again, it goes back to that operating account and that reserve account. If we have pending litigation against an HOA, that could, and the HOA loses and has to pay out a bunch of money, that could deplete their reserves quite quickly. Or it's an instance where it could show that an HOA is not managed very well, right? So there's a lot of options there. So they do have to disclose if there's pending or anticipated litigation or claims affecting the HOA. The HOA has or has not maintained financial statements as required by Civil Code Section 5300. See page 2 for Section 5300 requirements. Financial records are maintained by blank, right? Hopefully all the HOAs that you enter into contract have this box marked yes. They have been, sorry, this one over here, they have maintained financial statements. And if they're maintained by a CPA or somebody else, they would fill in that information there. The HOA charges the following fees and or holds deposits for transfers of ownerships, move in, move out, refundable, move deposits, or other, right? This is where it's breaking down what the fees are going to be charged to the transfer this property to the new buyer. This is why it's so important to have this up front. This, if your property's in an HOA, you should get this filled out as soon as you get that listing agreement signed. This would be something I would want to include in my template for an HOA listing. And I would want to get this filled out and returned from the HOA ASAP so that I know what this is, so that I know on the purchase contract how it needs to be filled out for those fees for transfer, right? So here we've got a fee for transfer of ownership. There's a move-in fee, there's a move-out fee, there's a refundable move deposit or other, so they can fill that information out. The HOA does or does not have separate rules and regulations in addition to the CC&Rs. 99% of HOAs have separate rules and regulations above and beyond CC&Rs. So oftentimes if a single family residence is in a HOA, then you've got your HOA requirements and you've got your CC&Rs. Those CC&Rs are going to be attached to the preliminary title report most of the time. Most condos don't have CC&Rs. They just have, or even like your PUDs, your planned urban developments. Those are usually just regulated by the CC&R or the HOA rules and regulations, which are usually stricter and more enforceable than CC&Rs. Here's where the HOA association signs their position, the name of the HOA. They're going to print their name, date, and put their telephone number. By signing below, the undersigned seller or sellers are making the above request of the HOA and acknowledge that each has read, understand, and received a copy of this HOA information request. Okay, any questions on page 1 of the HOA information request? Feel free to ask a listing agent if they have this completed when you go to make an offer on a HOA community. Hey, did you get the HOA information request completed? I'd like to see that, right? All right, page 2 just talks about, hey, California Civil Code Section 5300 provides that the HOA financial statement should contain, among other things, a pro forma operating budget showing the estimated revenue and expenses on an accrual basis, a summary of the association's reserve prepared pursuant to Section 5660 or 5565, a summary of the reserve funding plan adopted by the board as specified in paragraph 5 of subdivision B of Section 5550, The summary shall include notice to members that the full reserve study plan is available upon request, and that the association should provide the full reserve plan to any member upon request. A statement as to whether the board has determined to defer or not undertake repairs or replacement of any major component within the remaining life of 30 years or less, including a justification for the deferral or decision not to undertake the repairs or replacement. Statement as to whether the board has determined or anticipates that the levy of one or more special assessments will be required to repair, replace, or restore any major component, or to provide adequate reserves therefore. If so, the statement shall also set out the estimated amount, commencement date, and duration of the assessment. A statement as to the mechanism or mechanisms by which the board will fund reserves to repair, replace major components, including assessments, borrowing, use of assessments, deferral, or selected replacements of repairs or alternate mechanisms. A general statement addressing the procedures used for the calculation and establishment of those reserves to defray the future repair, replacement, or additions to those major components that the association is obligated to maintain. The statement shall include, but need not be limited to, reserve calculations made using formula described in paragraph 4 of subdivision B of section 5570, and may not assume a rate of return on cash reserves excess of 2% above the discount rate published by the Federal Reserve Bank System of San Francisco at the time the calculation was made. A statement as to whether the association has any outstanding loans with the original term of more than 1 year, including the payee, interest rate, amount outstanding, annual payment, and when the loan is scheduled to be retired. A summary of the association's property, general liability, earthquake, flood, and fidelity insurance policies. When the common interest development is a condominium project, a statement describing the status of the common interest development as a Federal Housing Administration approved condominium project pursuant to FHA guidelines, including whether the common interest development is an FHA approved condo project. When the common interest development is a condo project, the statement describing the status of the common interest development as a Federal Department of Veteran Affairs or VA approved condominium project pursuant to VA guidelines, including whether the common interest development is a VA approved condominium project. Oh my goodness. So all that should be included as part of the financial statements. So in case you're wondering what should be included in the financial statements, all of that information should be in there. Any questions about page 2 of the HOA IR form?
No.
No. All right. The next document is your HOA RS form, which is also referenced in that HOA section. This is the homeowner association request for required statutory documents and charges. So remember up here on page 1 of this form, it said that, hey, within 10 calendar days from receipt of this request, provide the answers to the questions on section 2 and the items and information listed on the HOA RS and the HOA RN. So this is the HOA RS form. So you would include this with that HOA IR. This says that, hey, here's the property address, here's the seller's name, here's the mailing address. Seller may, in accordance with section 4530 of the Civil Code, provide to the prospective purchaser at no cost current copies of any documents specified by section 4525 that are in the possession of the seller. A seller may request some or all of these documents, but shall not be required to purchase all the documents listed on this form. Provider of Civil Code section 4525 items, print name, print title, is it an association or an agent? This is for the association to fill out, and the date this form was completed. Check or complete applicable column or columns below. And here is each item that's required. These are called statutory disclosures. This is what you should receive in your HOA package for it to be completed. It's going to list the document name, the Civil Code section where it's mentioned, the fee that the HOA is going to charge to get that document, and whether we wanted it, right? So the HOA response, either attached, not available. So we've got, yes, it's attached. It's not available. That would be in/AV. It's not applicable would be an in/APP, or directly provided by seller, confirmed in writing by seller as current documents, DP. Okay, so we're only going to ask for what we need. You've got your articles of incorporation or statement that HOA is not incorporated, right? our articles of incorporation. You got your CC&Rs, you got your bylaws, you got your operating rules and regulations that says to which the board, what rules and regs the board has to adhere to, how new members are elected and that type of thing. Age restrictions, if any, your annual budget report or summary, including reserve study, your assessment and reserve funding disclosure summary, financial statement review, assessment enforcement policy, insurance summary, regular assessment, special assessment, emergency assessment, other unpaid obligation of seller, approved charges to assessments, settlement notice regarding common area defects, your preliminary list of defects, notice or violations, required statement of fees, and any rental restrictions, if any. That's what you should be provided as part of the statutory disclosures. So those are the California required disclosures for an HOA. Okay. That's page 1. Page 2. Oh, we also have the minutes of the regular board meetings conducted over the previous 12 months if requested. Okay. Total fees for the documents is there. Here's the HOA's information. They're going to put their name there, or the HOA's information, date. Somebody's going to sign it and then put their title there. Seller signs here. And then the buyer acknowledges a receipt and copy each item checked above. Brokers have not and will not review the documents, provided this document may be executed in counterparts. So, right, so when we get that HOA document package, we should be providing that with this form to our buyers and saying, hey, check off that everything that you should have been included should be. If you have a transaction coordinator, they should be double checking that this information is in that HOA disclosure package. If you don't have a transaction coordinator, you should make sure everything that's part of your job, right? Hey, we don't have to review all the documents, but we do need to make sure everything that should have been included was included. Okay. Questions about this? Has anyone seen this form as part of an HOA transaction?
Never seen that form.
Never seen it, right? No. It
No.
should be being used. Yes, Charles.
No,
No, right? Nobody's seen this form yet. It should be used on every single transaction with an HOA. Now, in all fairness, most of our transactions in the greater Solano County area don't have HOAs. I've done lots of HOA transactions. I've never included this form. So I'm just as at error, and I've never requested this form, right? It doesn't have to be provided necessarily by the seller either. You could be like, hey, where's our HOA RS form? And remember, it's mentioned on the residential purchase agreement. So this should be included. Any HOA transactions, this should get handed over with a copy of the HOA document package. And you should double check it against the list. Okay. Now, second, our next form is the HOA-RN form. Yes. Which is non-statutory documents and other information or charges. So, hey, does your buyer want other options? This is a good one to be like, hey, do you want to look at this? Some of these things are supposed to be provided for anyways, right? So if we look up here, I know it talked about it somewhere. Let's see here. Oh, I know where it was. Sorry. It was down here in the residential purchase agreement. So keep this in mind. We should see both of these forms because in the residential purchase agreement, section 11, it was 11L2, 1011L2. It says right here that, hey, if it's in a condo, right, then the seller is required in the time specified in paragraph 3 and 3 to deliver to buyers right here copies of all documents, disclosures of any pending or anticipated claim or litigation against the HOA, a statement containing the location and number of designated parking and storage spaces, copy of the most 12 months recent special meetings, names and contact information, right? If there's any pet restrictions or smoking restrictions, right? See, it's right there. So now if we go back and we look at this second form, we'll get there eventually. Hold on. We're almost there. Just got to get through all the fluff forms. All right. So our documents are non-statutory disclosures. we've got listed here pending or anticipated claims or litigation against the HOA, number of designated parking spots, location of parking spaces, designated storage spaces, location of storage spaces, name and contact information of other HOAs governing the property, private transfer fees and or taxes, pet restrictions, smoking restrictions, and any other document required by law or other. So even though these aren't statutory and they're not required by the state of California, these documents are also required by the residential purchase agreements. So if you have a listing, you should be providing, as soon as that listing agreement is signed, you should fill out this form here and request it, have the seller, we're gonna do the top part and have the seller sign this form here, this HOA IR, the information request. We're gonna attach to it. We're gonna go to our seller and say, hey, seller, do you have any of the most recent copies of these documents here? Most sellers are gonna be like, no, I don't have those. Okay, just for the record, most are gonna say no and be like, perfect. We're gonna request those from your HOA. Do you have any of this information or these documents as well on the second form, the HOA are in? Most people are gonna be like, no, I don't have those either. So you're gonna attach both of these forms to that HOA IR and you're gonna send it over to the HOA. They're gonna come back and say, hey, the fee for all those documents is X. You're gonna say, seller, go to your HOA and pay those document fees so that we can get all these HOA documents and make sure we maintain compliance with not only the California Civil Code, but also the residential purchase agreement. Okay, so this form's the same as the other one, it's just non-statutory. So same top, property address, owner of property, mailing address, provider information that the HOA is going to complete when they fill out this form. They're going to say, hey, here's the fees for those documents. Yes, it's included. No, it's not included. It's not, doesn't apply. Or the seller said they had that form. Right, information provided in this form may not include all fees that may be imposed before the close of escrow. Additional fees that are not related to the requirements of section 4525 shall be charged separately. Those would be those transfer fees. Seller hereby confirms that all HOA documents delivered to buyer by seller DP are current documents. So technically the seller doesn't have to sign this if the seller's not providing any documents. Okay, if they're all coming directly from the HOA, we can bypass the seller's signature. You could even write on there if you want, you could write like seller did not provide any documents, right? I acknowledge a receipt of copy of each item above. Brokers have not and will not review the documents provided. This document may be executed in counterparts. So again, you want to double check that HOA package and make sure all these things are included in there. Sometimes like pet restrictions, smoking restrictions, that's part of those CC&Rs or those HOA rules and regulations. But you want to make sure all that information's in there. Then the buyer is going to sign it. When it says counterparts, just so you know, what that means is like seller may sign one copy, buyer may sign another copy. It really doesn't matter. Seller may have signed the original and then the HOA filled it out and signed it. And now a separate one. And now the buyer signing a third one. So it just means that it can be signed by multiple people. Any questions about any of those HOA forms? The HOA IR, the HOA, I feel like I'm dying today. The HOA RS or the HOA RN.
Amy, did you hear my question earlier about, is it common practice for them to split the HOA fees for the seller and buyer?
I honestly have not paid. Okay. Let me restate that. In the old residential purchase agreement, that option wasn't there. It was who's paying the HOA fees. So we always specified, generally we asked the seller to pay the transfer fees for the HOA. The new residential purchase agreement that came out with the grid in like 2020, that one's the first one. And I don't even think that HOA information was in the first one. I think that came out in the second revision of the residential purchase agreement where it says, hey, if it's split, this is the thing. And I don't know the answer to that question. I've never paid close enough attention to the HOA transfer fees to know, because I haven't done very many HOA transactions in the last 2 years. So that I don't know. If they already have a copy of the HOA IR, so if the listing agent has done their due diligence, then you would know that, hey, what's being charged here, because it talks about the HOA transfer fee. But I would probably always specify there somebody to pay for those transfer fees instead of just leaving it blank. I would probably, depends how competitive the market is. If you're trying to be super competitive, you may specify that the buyer's going to pay for those. Otherwise, I would probably, my default would be the seller pays for the transfer fees of the HOA.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Yep.
Hey, Amy, roughly how much money are we talking about for all that?
The packet of disclosures and documents that's required, HOAs charge anywhere from like $300 to like $1,200 for the disclosure package. They charge an exorbitant amount of fee. It's kind of like an appraiser, like they can, because you have to pay it and you have to provide those documents. For the transfer fees, it's usually not that much. I think they usually range, I would say like $500, like $300 to $500 is what I've normally seen as like transfer fees for the HOA transfer. And then oftentimes they do require like a month or 2 months paid in advance of that HOA fee. Like if it's a monthly fee, they require that to be paid 1 or 2 months in advance so that it covers, because what happens if somebody's financing the purchase, oftentimes the HOA fee is included, like if it's a monthly HOA fee, it's included as part of their payment. So they break it down on a monthly basis. But what happens is, like if I close today on a property, my first mortgage payment isn't going to be until December 1st, right? I'm going to close today. I pay the interest from now until the end of October at the close of escrow. And then my interest starts accruing for my first mortgage payment in November. So I don't have that first mortgage payment until December 1st. So if I make my first payment on December 1st, my first HOA check isn't going to the HOA probably until like mid-December, beginning of January. So oftentimes those HOAs like to collect a couple months of fees up front as part of that transfer, just to make sure their dues are paid current. Charles has the Aurora Borealis behind him. I thought we were going to be able to see that about a week ago, but we weren't. So.
Still learning and playing with my background and all that stuff.
I like it. I like it. So, yeah, so that's how the HOA fees work. I would probably ask the seller to pay for the transfer fee. And then also keep in mind too, that on the residential purchase agreement, let's see, I think that was down here where it talks about hold on, I'm gonna find it. Time of possession, owner occupied, 7C. Let's start there. Condition of property at close of escrow. Oh, so here at close of escrow on section 7D, it says seller assigns the buyer any assignable warranty rights for the items included in the sale, and seller shall provide to buyer all copies of any such warranties. Agents can, hold on, seller shall at close of escrow, unless this is E now, unless otherwise agreed to, and even if seller remains in possession, provide keys, passwords, codes, and or means to operate old locks, mailboxes, security system, alarm, home automation system, internet connected devices included in the purchase price, garage door openers, and all items included in paragraph 3P or 9 of the property is a condominium or located in a common interest development. Seller should be responsible for securing or providing any such items for association amenities, facilities, and access. Buyer may be required to pay a deposit to the homeowners association to obtain keys to accessible HOA facilities. But ultimately, the seller is required to pass on that pool key and that the clubhouse key or whatever else they have for that common area. So in case you ever have a problem with that, that's in section 7E of your residential purchase agreement. Outlines what should be provided to the buyer at the close of escrow. Okay. Any other questions with regards to, well, anything in general, but specifically the HOA itself or HOA forms? No, everybody's good. Fabulous. Then that's all I have for you today. I will not be with you next week. Stay tuned for the schedule that's going to come out here shortly. And we'll keep you updated. Otherwise, you can always tune in to the Zoom link, the same Zoom link at the same times as next week, and to see what's going on. I think they're still going to run it as a Zoom. Abby's going to be available to help Ed run on the Zoom. So I'm hoping they'll still run everything via Zoom as well. But if you have any questions, reach out to Ed, and I still will be available over the next couple weeks, even though I'm not doing the trainings and such. I'll be available via text. It's going to be your best option first, so that I can step out if you need a phone call, but I will have my computer with me and my phone. And as you know, sitting around a hospital really just entails a lot of sitting and doing nothing. So feel free to bother me.
Oh, you shouldn't have told me that.
I know. I'll just block you, Anastasia. That's all right.
Wow, no love.
All right, everybody have a fabulous day and a great weekend. And then we will see you soon.
You too. Thank you, Amy. Thank you, everybody.
Yep.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.